Happy Friday, everyone. Brilliant to see so many of you joining us. I'm just going to give it a few more seconds for people to filter through. Get started with this next installment of our Building an Enterprise Level System with Xero webinar series, where today we're talking about leveling up your management reporting. Thank you again for joining us. It's been an absolutely brilliant start to the series this week with the launch webinar on Tuesday, and this is now our third of the 13 topic webinars. Amazing insights, and I'm so thrilled to be joined by our fantastic panelists this morning who will introduce themselves very shortly. So thank you for joining. There's a Q&A box in the tools on Zoom, so please do fire through any and all questions on there. The plan for today, we're going to do brief intros shortly. We'll get into our discussion, briefly cover what's coming up. That'll be the 30 minutes of content, and then there will be bonus Q&A with our fantastic panelists off the back of that. I'm the co-founder and CEO here at Mayday. Our mission is to mend month end. We're starting with the needs of multi-entity businesses, intercompany recharges, cross-entity bank reconciliation, ensuring that intercompany loans stay in balance. I'm an accountant by training, so started my career at Deloitte and then moved out, headed up a succession of SME and startup finance teams. I'm a 2 times multi-entity group Xero using finance leader. And with this webinar series, we are trying to create the resource I wish I'd had as a finance leader of a growing Xero using business about how best to scale with it. I've been an accounting tech entrepreneur for the last decade now, so previously founded Chaser, the accounts receivable software, and I've been building Mayday with my co-founder Griff and our fantastic team for the last 2 years. So just to frame this series, so at Mayday, we're for larger Xero users, the majority of whom have in-house finance teams. And we kept finding 2 key questions that they were grappling with. Is Xero still the right system for me? And if the answer is yes, how long is that the case for? Indefinitely? Or what will be the point at which I outgrow it? And the nature of uncertainty is that when we don't know something, it leads us to act earlier. The move to an ERP is, as one of our customers described, horrible and hectic from her past experience. It's incredibly expensive, and 58% of ERP implementations fail. So we've got this idea of ER peace of mind that we are trying to pioneer with this series, the peace of mind of knowing how long I can scale with Xero as my accounting system. It's framed with how can we be most useful to our target customer. It's not product marketing. It's not about how to build a best-in-class app stack. There's a reason I'm not wearing a Mayday t-shirt today. It's about righting the misconception that it's not possible to move into that growth phase as a business with Xero as your accounting system. But it's not about replacing one myth with another. There will be situations where a business outgrows Xero. It's not about saying it's an all singing, all dancing panacea. So we want to also pick those out in the content in the series. That's quite enough from me. I'm so thrilled to be joined by Steve and Stu and Darren today. So I'm going to hand over to them to run through their intros. Stephen, over to you.
Hi, David. Thank you very much for inviting me today. Absolutely pleasure to join you. I'm Stephen. I'm the founder MD of Valued. We've been in the Xero ecosystem now, the Xero community, for 12 years. We are a Xero Platinum partner, multi-award winning there as well. And we've done so many implementations with businesses over the years. It's unbelievable.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Stephen. Brilliant to have you here. Stu, over to you.
I am Stuart Hurst, MD at Accounts and Legal, one of the fastest growing UK accountancy firms, and was Xero's most valuable professional a few years ago. Done over 2,000 conversions over the years, both at the coal face, but banging in those debits and credits and conversion balances, and these days from a more strategic point of view in terms of mapping out processes of planning. And I've also worked with around 200 plus apps, again, some on a daily basis, others on a one shot, on mapping that out with the weird and wonderful, really. So I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly when it comes to scaling Xero.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Stu. And Daz, over to you.
Good morning, everyone. just a very, very brief intro. Darren Glanville, country manager at Fathom. Been in the accounting space for 20 odd years. I've recognizing some names are coming through on the Indie channel. So I've had the pleasure of working for some of the larger providers, including Sage and CCH, before moving to a small unknown application at the time called Xero. Had some many wonderful years at Xero, but always wanted to help firms transform and do more. And now I'm really thrilled to be heading up the team at Fathom. So yeah, I've really seen the transition of what the cloud has meant, what that extra life, both for small businesses, but also for businesses that scale, and that's really important for us, and that's the key topic today. So keen to talk about that.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And Daz, I'm going to come to you very briefly first, just to frame what we're talking about today. You know, when we talk about report or management reporting, we talk about business intelligence. What are we talking about here in terms of jobs to be done?
I think there's a number of things here. I think one is ultimately we're really helping customers understand their business better. This is really not just waiting to the year end. This is giving opportunities to really dive into the crux of what's going on a much more frequent basis, and course correct and have that deeper understanding. And I think, you know, for me, this isn't just about pigeonholing it into reporting and BI. That's you know, something of what we do. And again, this isn't a sales pitch for what we do, but we're understanding client needs so we can actually measure what's really important for those companies to manage. And then taking that further, for us, it's about then saying, okay, if we've got the reports, what about consolidations? You know, we bring that together, and then how do we forecast? What's planning? How do we affect and get the outcomes? I think that, for me, is the crux of what we're talking about here with reporting and BI. It's taking arbitrary data points and turning them into something that's really useful, that we can then have a direct impact on outcomes ultimately at the end of the day. And whether that's reporting, KPIs, consolidations, or forecasting, that's it. And that's what Fathom's so passionate about.
Amazing. That's so clear. So at its core, it's understanding what's going on, but then on top of that, it's what do we do so that we can course correct on top of that?
Absolutely. I think if anyone's really gone into this, and I've talked about this many times, for me, it's that there is a model, the DIKW model. It's data, insights, knowledge, wisdom. You know, data, so much data sits within systems, including Xero, but it's arbitrary, and it's just giving us signals. It's, you know, what we need to do is translate. It's like our car dashboard. We've got red lights moving, needles moving. It's just giving us signals. What we have to do is synthesize that data, translate it, articulate it, put that in a way that customers understand. You know, customers aren't accountants, so that's a really important point for us.
Fantastic. Well, that's a great framing, and you talk there about, you know, there's so much data that sits in Xero, for example, and I think we'll segue from that into Steve and Stu. Before we kind of blow past into the ecosystem and what you can do with it, let's focus first on Xero itself and the native functionality it has. You know, what does Xero do well when it comes to management reporting?
In terms of what it does well, the customizing, it's easy to customize the basic report. So, you know, you'll get your basic P&L, but if you want to get a bit more complicated, get EBITDA in there, move things around, you can do that quite simple. It's a drag and drop. It's minutes, not hours, as it is with some more complicated systems that are often, you need a degree in SQL database management to try and change any of the reporting stack. So in terms of building a base level of what you need, it can do some nice schedules. I would also say, although it's only basic on the budgeting front, it has a budget in there, albeit just on a profit and loss basis. But having that budget in there it's almost like my first budget for some businesses, of getting that understanding of having actual versus budget. And it doesn't always look the prettiest, and there are other ways of making it look better with the app stack. But for that initial understanding of am I on track or not on the financials, it can be a really great place to start that doesn't blow people's minds, if you like. And, you know, you can have too much data sometimes. And I think it's quite a nice start there. And just building very basic snapshots. Even on its dashboard, you can add a watch list for key nominal codes. So even just honing in on a few key numbers, they are there on that front page of Xero. And again, that can just really focus the mind for specific individuals in the team. So that works really well.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Steve. Stephen, anything to add to that?
Yeah, 100% echo what Stu said there. Absolutely great points. The only other thing that it does for me as well is I'm old enough to remember, no disrespect to the other panelists here, I'm old enough to remember manual books and records, where the manual records would go to the bookkeeper would give it to the accountant would pass it back to the bookkeeper, and actually ended up with this triangle of just a mess. But what Xero does for me is it gives the business owner the insight. It gives the business owner the reality of what's happening within their business. It gives them the control on a day-to-day basis. So it lets them affect their numbers. When you look at their why, when you look at their purpose, when you look at the budgets that Stu was talking about there, actually, I can make a difference to these figures. And because Xero is real time, they're actually able to make a huge impact on that and impact the figures to achieve their goals, to do that course direction that we were talking about a little bit earlier. That's the biggest thing for me, is it gives the client the control over their data, over their business.
Like most things though, isn't it? Just coming back on that, it's like the gateway drug. It starts you off brilliantly, but then we scale further beyond that.
Mm-hmm. Brilliant. And moving on from that, what are those questions? So, Steve and Stu, you work with hundreds of different businesses. I'm a finance leader. What pains am I coming to you with? What am I voicing that means I need more than what Xero itself can offer?
I think the big thing for me is ask the clients, what's your biggest pain point? And the way that we do it is we say, what keeps you awake at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning? It's normally finance. It's normally, have I got enough cash in the business to pay month end? Have I got enough cash in the business for the interest rate rise? Have I got enough cash in the business for the cost of electricity, gas going up? Have I got enough cash to be able to do something? All of a sudden, by actually talking to the clients about their problems, their pain points, and cash is one, staff's another one that comes across all the time, but also knowledge and power is a huge one. By giving them this information, by giving them the tools, as soon as we know that what is their biggest challenge, that's where we're seeing a huge difference with the client. So actually ask them what their problem is, and then make sure that Xero is customized, as Stu was saying there, customize it for each business to actually make sure that they're getting the right level of information from it.
Fantastic. And Stu, anything from your side, when you hear a client say X about their management reporting, that's immediately an indication for you that they need more than Xero itself has to offer?
I agree, as Stephen said, like cash is the number one probably. Of like Xero's okay at showing a cash summary, but in terms of projections, it's not so hot. There's a ton of apps that can do that so much better. So cash is definitely a pain point. Another probably obvious one is volume, really, in terms of volume of data that's being poured into Xero, that you'll get to a point, particularly e-commerce, where there's too much data that for Xero to handle on its own, where you'll need another app to start fishing that data up and sending it to Xero in a way that won't break it ultimately. So size is another one in terms of what's being poured in. And then in terms of sometimes complexities around if you want to do more detailed benchmarking, if you run different departments. Again, while Xero's great, it's got tracking, you don't get much more beyond a P&L per department. So again, as you get larger, you get different sites, you want better insights, you can use the app stack. And also the control of the data. It's once if you can see the bank in Xero, you need to see that, if you like, then it's an all or nothing in terms of the reporting. You can't very well segment, the sales team can only see the sales information, someone else can see something else, and that's where the app stack can really create really beautiful dashboards for specific users. And that'd be a point again where the team gets bigger, maybe you've got investors and stakeholders. That's where I'd be using more sophisticated reporting again.
That's a really fascinating point, Stu, because and we'll come on in a minute to the, any of those that mean you need to move to an ERP. I think some people often think, okay, the access rights in Xero are limited, and therefore I need to move in order to segment them. But actually, you can ask a different question of, do those different team members really need access to Xero at all? Or is there a way that we could use an ecosystem product that then has that tiering of access for the relevant information? So that's fascinating. And thank you, Stephen and Steve, so much for that. We talked cash, we talked size with the volume of transactions, benchmarking, departments where, yes, you can get a P&L by department in Xero, but if you want something deeper than that, then that's a sign that you've outgrown. And then the controller data point that we just touched on there. before we get into the stories from the ecosystem and how that can help, I really just want to touch on, are there any of those points we've just covered that in your experience mean that a business's time with Xero has ended and they should be going straight to an ERP?
I'd say yes. There's one big strategic decision around when you're getting really big and the app stacks, where you've got maybe a CRM, debt collecting, reporting, invoice recognition. You can end up with it is feasible to end up with 20 plus apps plugged into this Xero, and there's a decision of, do you want best in breed and all these logins and transferring the data, or is it easier to have one to rule them all, if you like, in terms of access and training wise? That can be one big question around it. And some people, don't want to go with here comes another app, here comes another app. It can get quite complicated in that sense. So that's one thing just to think about from a strategic point of view. From an actual working point of view, sometimes as multinationals in multi-countries, it can be easier again to build something more bespoke. For example, like Xero, there's a global version, but I know in India, for example, their version of VAT rates have 2 different rates on one invoice. That blows Xero's mind. And there are workarounds, but it's, do you want to use workarounds or build something that is more bespoke and can actually do the job firsthand? And then just the final one for me would be, sometimes on these bigger companies, there might be some other bespoke system that isn't necessarily natural API, doesn't speak to Xero. Is it worth building? You would have to build something separate to make it speak to that, versus just kind of starting again and using an all-encompassing ERP. And again, I've failed twice in the 2000 Xeros that I've done, and one of them was because of that reason, because this other system just couldn't speak to Xero the way we wanted it to. So in the end, we scrapped it and went to an ERP.
Fascinating. Well, thank you so much for that. And now I'm really keen to get into the discussion of how the ecosystem can help. So, Stephen, you alongside kind of working with clients, you also act as a kind of virtual FD, virtual CFO for a number of them. And so, Stephen, if I can come to you first, in terms of, if you can share some stories about what you've been able to achieve in a management reporting sense with Xero plus its ecosystem.
Yeah, it's been transformational. It genuinely has been transformational for me and also my clients over the last 12 years. I don't mean that very lightly, because what it's enabled us to do is actually get clients to understand their numbers. So instead of simply saying, there's your profit and loss, there's your balance sheet, bye, I'll see you in 12 months' time, what we've found is that clients are actually saying, I want more regular information. So as a business, we're actually going from an annual service to a monthly, quarterly service. And that's been absolutely phenomenal for us. But more importantly, it's actually changed our relationship with the client, because what we found, especially after COVID, is clients want to do things differently. Clients don't want to go back to the office 5 days a week. They don't want to keep on having the sales to staff ratio and things and so on and so forth on within their business. So because things have changed, because we had that big reset in COVID, clients are now actually saying, what can I do differently? Because I didn't understand that I could do things differently. I just thought I had to get 5% better than last year. What we're seeing is we're taking clients on a journey. So we're starting with their why, we're starting with their purpose, we're starting with understanding what their goals are as a business. We're then sitting with them and saying, right, well, actually, what is the impact if you achieve these goals? Let's break that down into a monthly and a weekly figure. Let's put some systems in there to actually help you to do that. So maybe something like an EOS system, we're helping the clients to implement that. What it's then doing is that course correction, but it's accountability as well. So we're saying to a client, right, you said you were going to do this month. Have you been able to do that? No, yes, right. It's worked really well. What can we do to replicate that? It hasn't worked. What do we need to do to change it? That's where tools like Fathom within the budgeting ecosystem for us has worked really well, because we're taking that ecosystem plus Xero to cement a relationship. We've also got other pain points. So we're saying to the clients, right, what would happen if you had X amount of extra money in the bank? So can we bring something like Chaser in, where we can actually start to get the debt chased on behalf of the client? And what it's actually enabled us to do is have real conversations with clients about their why, about their purpose, but actually take away so many of these pain points that clients have had, put them in control, and actually help them to help themselves to get a business that actually makes them passionate again, because a lot of them were passionate when they first started in business, and that was beaten out of them over a number of years. Make them passionate again about achieving their goals. And we're seeing some fantastic results on that.
Amazing. And Stu, I'm going to come to you next. So, perhaps if you can sort of cast your mind to your largest clients with in-house finance teams and what they've been able to do from a management reporting perspective with Xero plus its ecosystem, who springs to mind and what have they been able to do?
Yeah, there's some really cool stuff in an incredibly geeky way that you can do, I guess, with it. So I guess the main thing is it's an opportunity to start from scratch almost when you build this. What do you want to report on? What is it that is driving this business? And sometimes getting business owners to think beyond the numbers. Like, the financials are great, and making those look pretty and understandable is great, but the biggest ones we're tracking the drivers of those, the non-financial information. So there's some large recruitment firms that we work with, for example, that are reporting on the actual salespeople's activities in terms of meetings, CVs, and all that is tracked dashboard wise. That then helps predict, future sales really, and look at trends. So for me, it's the non-financial is a big one, and the one source of truth is another one. That when you start to build a number of apps in there, if you get it right, you can end up entering data in one of those apps and it feeding through quite beautifully into a number of other pieces of information. So you often find when you get larger on the reporting, it's very easy for someone to start a spreadsheet because they know what that is, and it's their spreadsheet. And then someone else does it, they've got their spreadsheet, and that the two don't talk to each other and they're out of date. So having the one source of truth as well on these larger firms is really, really powerful with using some of the reporting tools.
Amazing. And then Daz, over to you in terms of across all of your customers at Fathom, and particularly the ones with in-house finance teams, any stories there about how they have been able to successfully scale with Xero, and what that's what they look like as businesses, how big they've been able to get to as businesses whilst with Xero and Fathom.
One of the things I just want to come back quickly on is some of the things that Stephen and Stuart have been saying. This is for me, I hate the term advisory because I think it's way overused and it's a bit of a cliche. What I'm seeing from firms is I'm seeing them deliver more business coaching, and this really fits part of that. And come back to what Stu was saying, understanding what it is that's important for that business to measure down at the driver level really has an impact, because then we're starting to do some interesting things in terms of predictions and what future sales are going to look like. So that's really interesting for me. I mean, it sounds glib, but, we see people who traditionally have written stuff down on the back of a cigarette packet. We all suffer with confirmation bias around some of our numbers, but what this is actually doing is presenting hard data, and it's irrefutable data about what's going on in the business. We've had, one of our customers worked in the drone industry, and what they were doing, it's what they do is they service power lines. So it's traditionally the route is getting people out there in vehicles to look at these lines. Now they're doing it with drones, but what they're also doing is they're seeing how much fuel was costing them. And this it sounds crazy, but once you start measuring that, you can make some really interesting business decisions that impact that positively. We had one of our customers that, just by looking at their analysis and their management reports, realized that if they didn't change anything, they were going to be out of business in 6 months. This is the power of what people are seeing. And whether that's, building this around an ecosystem where you're using Chaser. Stephen, I know you've done a lot in the past with implementing Unleashed and Workflow Max and others. All of these apps are coming together where you're pulling that data together. And that's for me is the key thing. So yes, I think we're seeing businesses scale and grow. It means the difference between them being able to plan and take extra staff on. The key thing for me is then knowing that they're doing this from an informed position. They're not doing it from guesstimation. And that's the power. It's having that feeling that you've got a crystal ball where you can run things through, you can do some projections, you can look at a best case, worst case scenario. Heaven forbid we ended up in a situation that we had a couple of years ago where people were forced to suddenly realize that they had to work from home. People were coming out of offices, going at home. What would happen if that hit again? people can be a lot more prepared and a lot more confident. And I think that's the thing about management reporting and BI is clarity and confidence. And that's the key to it.
Fantastic. And so now I'm really keen to move on before I kind of touch on what's coming up, and then we'll get into the Q&A as that sort of bonus content after the half hour. If I could come to each of you for your top tip when it comes to scaling with Xero. So Stephen, I'll come to you first.
First thing for me is got to be map the journey out. What is it you're trying to achieve? Because as Stu said, sometimes you can have 20, 30 apps integrating with Xero. Actually map out what you're trying to achieve and make sure that it is going to work before you actually start that journey, because it can become very expensive if you've got lots of different apps feeding in, and the data can get corrupted in various different ways. So make sure that you map that journey out. That would be the big thing for me.
Fantastic. Stu, over to you.
Well, like I said, I've had two fail of the 2000 or so, and one was because there was a piece of technology that we didn't realise was so important and fundamental to the system that needed to feed into Xero, and the other one was because people thought they were going to lose their jobs. We didn't win the hearts and minds, and there was a threat to them in terms of that. So I would say, similar to what Stephen said on be clear on the reporting requirements and what you want, financial, non-financial, and what systems are involved. But most importantly, speak to all stakeholders on this integration, because if you've got someone in the business doing 3 days a week doing your Excel spreadsheets reporting, and you're going to build a new reporting system, you can be damn sure they ain't going to enjoy it. I'll be against it to begin with. So making sure that all stakeholders have got input, and you don't miss a challenge and as a result, or a problem that comes up partway through implementation as a result.
Fantastic. And Daz, over to you.
I think I'm very fortunate that I've sold both. I've sold ERP systems in the past, so I remember the heavy days of that and just how long a sales cycle that can be. So I'm coming at it from that perspective, and also having what I would consider to be great pre-sales people and post-sales people. I've seen great implementations of small business software. I've seen great implementations of ERP systems. I've seen poor implementations of small business systems and poor implementations of ERP systems, and I think there's a balance to it. Businesses can scale with Xero quite well, up to a fairly meaty size, but I think it comes down to things that Stuart has said already, and Stephen. There are certain industries where it won't work, but be very clear. And I think Stuart has absolutely nailed it. This is something, when you're looking at that, every stakeholder has to be on board with this. And we also need to know they need to be aware of what this means for them, what the products are, what it's going to do for them, the pain points it's going to resolve, and it's implemented and signed off at all stages, and everyone's happy, and there's great post-sale support. But having said that, Xero can scale, and we've seen it go very, very well. So I can't really add anything other than that to what Stuart and Stephen have already said.
Fantastic. There we are, 29 minutes past the hour, slick and bang on time. So let me very briefly cover what is coming up next. So after a weekend to process the insights from the fantastic webinars so far, we've got proactively managing currency risk on Monday with Sharon and Tracy from KTL and Glenn from Hedge Flows. Then on Tuesday, manage complexity when scaling payroll. We've got Beth from Silvera, Dave Selleck from Siggrove, and Sabrina from Pento. And then on Wednesday, we've got manage complex manufacturing and inventory processes. We've got Kerry Baker-Biggs from BookCheck, Matt Flanagan from Blue Hub, and Amber Chaff from Unleashed. So that's what we got coming up. You see the link to register at enterprise.getmayday.com. And so it's been a brilliant discussion today. I'm eager to pick up a few questions before we wrap up. The first is, and there's a really interesting one there around who are the team members that need to be involved and bought in when it comes to management reporting? Because, there's a way of looking at these things. Okay, management reporting is a finance responsibility and it's the finance team, but there's such rich insights. Stu, you talked about the sales info. You also made the point about winning the hearts and minds. So I'd really love to hear from all of you about who are the team members that need to be brought in when it comes to implementing management reporting more broadly as that sort of single source of truth, and how best to do that. So Stu, I might come to you first because you've made the points before.
Yeah, I mean, it is as broad as everyone in that organisation in terms of departments wise, and obviously you start with those at management level and their challenges, their issues, and the finance function in terms of how things will be processed. But as we touched on, it's then the salespeople. It's in terms of winning hearts and minds. It's about people feeling listened to ultimately, as opposed to being told that something is going to be implemented. Is a massive part of this. So, we were finding with the sales teams particularly are often the worst when it comes to keeping records and things together. But that pitching of why that's important and what that can do, and creating that leaderboard and that sense of achievement in there is really important. So right across the business, and I would say sometimes I have worked with MDs or FDs that kind of go, no, you don't need, I've got the answers, you don't need to speak to anybody else. And every time we've gone down that path, like something has been more difficult than it needed to be, and something has come out of the woodwork part implementation. So, we do work with some bullshit MDs sometimes, but don't be afraid to challenge back and just ask some really challenging questions, because if you don't find them out at that stage, then
that's a definite red flag, isn't it, Stuart? When you hear that.
Yeah, absolutely. And then it's really interesting when you then speak to someone at the coalface. And I think all levels of the firm in terms of data entry, because again, the challenges at top level can be so different to those at the coalface. And having done Xero integrations myself, like low level to high level, I know what someone thinks is easy or that's a straightforward process. Actually, there might be 7 parts to it to actually build that and make that happen. So those doers at the coalface are certainly just as important as those making the management decisions.
Amazing. Stephen, Darren, anything else from your perspective on that when it comes to the other team members brought in and winning the hearts and minds?
For me, it's exactly what Stuart's saying. Is what we find when we've been implementing software is you start with the MD. The MD hasn't got the answer, because traditionally the MD doesn't know what each junior salesperson's doing or somebody in the accounts team is doing. They kind of know, but they don't know the specifics. So it's involving every single member of the team and asking them what their pain point is, asking them what actually takes the most time, what's a part of their job, and making sure that you're not coming in, as Stuart was saying, as a threat, actually coming in to help them to improve their position, to help them improve their job. And the results, again, can be outstanding from that, but it's involving every single person within the team and making them feel valued. That's the crucial part for me.
Yeah, I'm smirking. I'm smirking here because it just takes me back to my days of selling, and you would find more out from the receptionist, and someone who would maybe a cleaner. I have seen this as well firsthand, but you find out more about the operational level of the business from those guys than sometimes the senior management, because they have a particular high level view. And sometimes you really need to get into the weeds and understand it. So it's just taking me. I'm having flashbacks here. So do indulge me on that one.
Yeah, I was just going to say on the last point on that of if you're running a business and your accountant says they can do a Xero conversion or an app stack build, and they'll do it for free or they'll do it for a few £100, they ain't going to do it properly. Like, there's a reason this costs several £1,000s in implementation fees, because you've got to get that input, and the planning is as much time consuming, if not more so, than the actual bolting it together. So red flags should be flashing if your accountant is going to do it for a couple of £100 or indeed free of charge. It won't. I can guarantee corners will be caught in that, and it'll be around the stakeholder piece.
Fantastic. Really rich insights there, and it reminded. I think it's like an Einstein quote of, like, if he gave me 60 minutes to solve a problem, I'd spend 55 minutes diagnosing it and then 5 minutes actually solving it. And Andrew makes a great comment in the kind of chat about it. People, process, tech when it comes to change. Just to wrap things up, I'm really keen to get your perspective on. There's a great one here about, like, what does great look like when it comes to a management reporting? When it comes to management reporting, when you kind of, what does it look and feel like when you see a finance function like, okay, they are doing brilliantly when it comes to management reporting?
Is that for me?
Anyone who fancies jumping in on it.
I'm going to say something controversial, but I really, from an accountant's, obviously, if you are an internal CFO, FD, you want good data. That's ultimately what you want. You want it presented in a way that's articulate. I think if you're a customer, you're not paying for a report. You're paying for that interpretation and the outcome that you're going to get. So that's what I mean, obviously we need to present it in a way, because not everyone likes tables, not everyone likes a lot of numbers. Some people like it to be highly visual, others. So I think you need to balance it. And I think, again, that comes back to understanding your client and what it is they want. What are we reporting on? Why are we reporting on that? What are the outcomes that we're ultimately trying to drive for? Are we measuring the right KPIs? Because sometimes people throw KPIs in there, and just for the sake of throwing them in, and they're actually not the ones that you should be managing. So I'll open that up to Stuart and Stephen as well.
I just say understandable is the most important thing to those users. Like, you find £1. I mean, if you've got in larger finance companies, like the FDs will know the numbers, but some of those other departments, it's rare I find a man or woman will stand in a board meeting and go, I don't know what that means, and have the courage to do that. Yeah. They'll nod their head and say it's okay. So making it understandable for the non-financial people is really important. And some of the best ones I've done have been when I always say, if we build management reports, if it's still the same in 6 months' time, sack us. Like, we're rubbish. We've not understood your business and got your drivers and levels. So it shouldn't be I've got this PDF, I've got this report, boom, we've done it, jobs are good, and like, that's it, end of. It should evolve as the months pass and new things, things change and ideas change and source information do. And the app stack gets better and better. You think back to 5 years ago, it's come light years forward in terms of what we can get now. So if you embed yourself into the same pack and stop evolving, then what's the point, kind of thing. You're going to stop pushing. So that would be the other thing, that should just evolve.
Yeah.
I think from my point of view, going back to the question, is there such a thing as an ideal report pack? I don't think there is, because every client's different. As the guys were saying there, every client wants something different. Every business needs something different. It's about making sure that is customized for their business. Is it something that is graphical? Is it something that's very number-based? Is it something that's a 4 or 5 page report, or is it something that's just a 1-page report? It's about actually making sure that that's relevant to that client. That's the important bit for me. And that non-financial KPIs, those non-financial data, that's vital. That's vital within there.
Fascinating. Thank you so much. It's been such a great discussion today. I've learned a huge amount from it as we wrap up now and kind of look ahead. So I think it's really come through very clearly that management reporting is more than a P&L, a balance sheet, and potentially a forecast. Yes, that's at the core of it, but need to think beyond finance when it comes to management reporting, and the way that the Xero plus its ecosystem can enable that. And I love the insight there from Stuart around 2 out of 2,000 have not worked out, and that's just that really kind of encapsulates the extent to which a business can scale with Xero. But there will be situations where that's not the case, and interesting that one of those was a hearts and minds issue, which is a great great indicator to the need to consider the planning side of things, and people, process, and then tech. Very, very grateful to everyone for joining today. Really grateful to our panelists. Thank you very much to everyone who has joined us, and we look forward to seeing you over the course of the rest of this series. I hope everyone has a great weekend. Thank you very much.
Thank you.